Welcome to the Floyd Memorial Library podcast, where we sit down with the people who give shape, texture, and voice to life on the North Fork of Long Island. Some are rooted here by generations, others arrived by chance or choice, but all carry with them a piece of the story. We talk about what's changing, what's worth holding on to, and the currents of history, both quiet and loud, that run through this place. I'm your host, Christopher Bianchi, and for episode 143, we sit down with Gilles Martin, senior winemaker at Sparkling Pointe. Raised near France's Champagne region, Gilles combined an early love of agriculture with studies in food science and oenology, earning national recognition when his master's thesis on wine filtration was honored by President Jacques Chirac. His career has taken him from vineyards in France, Germany, and Australia to celebrated wineries in California and Virginia before arriving on the North Fork in 1997. Since then, he's helped shape acclaimed wineries and crafted award-winning sparkling wines, blending old world tradition with new world innovation. We'll talk about his global journey, his passion for this region's terroir, and his vision for the future of the North Fork wine. So I hope you enjoy episode 143 with Gilles Martin. This episode was recorded May 2nd, 2025. Thank you so much for coming on the Floyd Memorial Library podcast today. I'm looking forward to talking to you today.
You're very welcome.
And so I'd like to just start in the beginning, if you can give us a little introduction about yourself, even where you were born and raised.
So I was born in France, not too far from the Champagne area, about 20-30 miles from the first vineyard of the Champagne area. And I grew up in a farm. My grandfather had orchards. He planted with my grandmother pears, apples, cherries, plum, all kind of fruit trees, and they had a little farm with chicken and rabbits. And although my grandfather was not originally from the farming family, he had to come in farming because he had lung problems. He lost a lung early in his life. So the doctor had to send him away from Paris, and that's how he decided to go back to his ancestors' soil and planted those orchards. So I grew up in the middle of that, learning a little more about what was nature and, of course, taking care of animals. And although I was quite interested with science, I knew from day one that I didn't want to stay behind a desk, and that I wanted to do something that was close to science. So basically, and it's one of your first questions over there, basically I studied food industry, but also biology and biotechnologies. And after that, I had actually an uncle that was a winemaker, but also not coming from that business, who was in south of France. I was close to Paris. And at the time, the weather in Paris was quite miserable, a little bit like in London, a lot of rain, a lot of cold weather. And he said, why don't you come down south in the Midi, we call it. And we have the sun, we have the mountains and the beach, and we have also the prettiest ladies that you can meet over there. As a single student, I said, well, cut me in. So I applied for the School of Oenology down south, and I was taken to both of them, and I chose to go to University One of Montpellier and do my degree in oenology back there.
And was that something you knew? Well, coming out of, I guess it wasn't high school that they would call it over there, but coming out and going into college, you knew you wanted
Yes,
something food science
yes, high
related.
school, what we call lycée in French. I studied biology there, so I knew already that I didn't
Hmm.
want to again, sit behind a desk and do accounting or do things like that. Because my
Yeah.
father actually was working for the train company, but he was into an office, doing office work
Mm.
basically, and that's what I knew I didn't want to do. So I knew I
Yeah.
wanted to be close to nature and enjoying the technologies as well. I've always been very close, and the food industry was actually at that time in the 80s really into developing the biotechnologies and the
Hmm.
technologies that we use in the food business today. It can be for wine, it can be for bakery, it can be for beer, for meat industry. All those industry really changed the last 20, 30 years, being a little more, having a little more science
Hmm.
into those businesses. So either into biotechnology or even into machinery and
Yes.
equipment. So I always been. I have another grandfather that was actually working with metal. He was someone that was adjusting parts for very precise machinery like radar. Um, and he taught us. I come from a family of three, my brother and older brother and younger sister. He told my brother and I all that part of the business,
Hmm.
mechanics, building things with your hands.
Hmm.
And that's part of what we do today. In a winery, we're not only doing chemistry to check the wine, but we're also having to take care of the equipment we're running for
Yes.
bottling or for different issue that we encounter into the making of wine.
Yes. And I was just curious, even after college, did you go back to the Champagne region, and what did
Yes,
you get started with the wine?
actually, after college, I wanted to travel and through the wine industry actually and learn more about wine outside of France because France was kind of very chauvinist place when it comes to wine. And although we had intensive research in that domain, because still today French wines are kind of the leading wines of the world, and especially the research associated with it. I wanted to see what was happening out there. I was not coming from a
Hmm.
vineyard of a family of vintners, so I wanted to understand. So I went to first Germany to learn a little bit about the German wines, and then from Germany I met a guy during my studies, my internship was from Australia, and he said, "Well, if you want, I'll find you a job in Australia." So I left Germany for Australia and spent 5 months over there before coming back to France. And in Australia, you have also an industry that likes research, and they do also a lot of research in Australia. So they're very technological wines, even more than the French wine. So kind of dip into that too. That was part of my um, training as well, because I didn't mention, but my uncle was working for a research station in France, and that's how I was also close to the research. And my internship I did also into a research station
Hmm.
in France called l'INRA, l'Institut National de Recherche Agronomique, so the National Institute for Agronomical Research. And I've always been interested with that, so I
Hmm.
like what we learn about the traditional way of winemaking, but also how we can implement the making of wine with new technology that will help us
Hmm.
making even better wines. That's the idea. So I went back to France, work in France, and I have a professor that called me and said, "Gilles, I have someone that's looking for a winemaker in in America. Are you interested? I know you've been traveling. I said, yeah, why not? And I ended up going to Virginia. Actually, it was very funny is that when I was in Germany, I met this guy that was a German guy that worked in actually Virginia. So I ended up going over there, and I worked there for 2 years. But I said, well, now I'm in America. The wine business really in America is in California. So I researched a little bit what I could do, and I ended up working for Roederer Estate in Anderson Valley, which is part of the Champagne Roederer, the maker of Cristal. And I worked there for 6 years. And then I came back to France for the same group, who also owned Champagne Deutz and a still wine, red wine winery and white wine winery in the northern Côte d'Iron called De Las Frères. And then I worked for De Las Frères for a little over about a couple of years. But at the same time, I met my wife, who's French, but was working, or still working actually, for Rutgers University in New Jersey. So after a couple of years, we got married, we had first kids, and we had to decide where to settle. And she had a hard time to find a job in France. So for love, I decided to move back to America. And that's how we find the North Fork. That was an upcoming area. And I said, that may be the place to be. And that's how I ended up there in 97.
97.
Actually.
And what did you think of the North Fork area at that time?
So at that time, the North Fork was quite new. There was a lot of trials and errors, but the wine business started in '72 in terms of a commercial aspect of it with the Hargrave. And by the late 90s, there was a second generation of people investing into the wineries that had hired more professional. So we had more professional in the vineyards, or vineyard manager that had learned from the trial and error of the first generation. And we had way more winemakers that came from different parts of the world that started also in this area. And we were able to also get better clone for our different varieties, and being able to also making better wines as well with the new technology that we were using at the time. And I think that's the whole story of the North Fork, is that with a few acres, we became about 3,000 acres or more today. And we have planted a lot of different varieties. Now we know a little more what works better for our area, what also the public is looking for. We are lucky to have a lot of seafood and fish and a farm stand that brings a lot of fresh vegetables and fruit. And I think that goes into the whole aspect of winemaking, to also deliver what goes well with the natural food of the area. The local food movement is quite heavy and heavier into the East Coast, and particularly here on Long Island. And a lot of people are looking to actually pair the food and the wine of this area. So I'm very fortunate to be able to be part of that development.
And then I just wanted to go back. For your master's thesis, you won national acclaim on wine filtration, presented by President Jacques Chirac. How was that experience when you got that award?
So, as I mentioned, when I did my thesis for my diploma, I did it at the research station called l'INRA. And over there, they studied a lot of new technology. And I was part of that new technology, what we call today cross-flow technology. What was the implication of the cross-flow filtration into the stabilization of the tartaric precipitation in wine? So it's very seems to be very scientific, but it's a natural aspect of the wine. When we have wine, we have a major acid in the grapes called tartaric acid, and the tartaric acid react a little bit, if you want, into the sugar and the honey. If the temperature goes down, the tartrate forms and settles. So those new technology are part of the impact that it can bring to the wine. And I worked on this thesis with my what you would call it, the head of the department over there, and we presented a paper that was actually rewarded with the best thesis of the all the French School of Enology for that year. And at the ceremony led by Jacques Chirac, I was awarded that merit that was happy to get.
Yes.
So how did that influence my winemaking? Certainly more interest into technology, new technology into the wine, and being part of, what I've been doing all those years is really follow the regular rules of winemaking that we learn in school, that we learn in the different area where you work as a winemaker, and develop and improve the winemaking by using what the research gives us.
Definitely.
And in our field, as I mentioned before, for the food industry, we had a lot of a big evolution, if I can use that term, in what we can use to help us making better wines.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And then also, because the Roederer estate, that was in Virginia?
No, the Roederer estate was in California.
California.
It's part of the Roederer group that makes a lot of wine in Reims, in France. And they, in the early 80s, they purchased land and built a winery in Philo, in the Anderson Valley, on the way to Mendocino. And I worked over there for 6 years as an assistant winemaker. And I learned all the secrets of the method champenoise over there, I have to say, by working with my mentors that were the winemakers from France. And I learned a lot on how to design a program to make those different wine, those different sparkling wine, and how to have the vision of making those wines.
And the sparkling wines, or your sparkling wines, were hailed as some of the best outside of Champagne. What was that experience like, and when you were getting some of that recognition? I
think what you realize is when you have a French company or a different company that goes overseas and start a new business, at the very beginning, it brings all its expertise with it. And that's what it was. As I said, I really learned the secret of the method champenoise over there, and what to do and what not to do, what to apply to the situation that you're in, develop a philosophy with the grapes that you're harvesting to the one you're making. And I think it's very important, especially in the making of the champagne or sparkling wine, where we have a second fermentation in the bottle. So we have a first blend of what we call the base wine, which are low alcohol, more acidic white wine that we blend together. And then we add some sugar, some yeast, and we re-ferment it to get the effervescence, those very nice bubbles that we all enjoy. And the wine, it becomes from a chrysalis become a butterfly. Really, it's a big change between what we put in the bottle and what we're going to present to the public when we later on, 2, 3, 5, 8 years later, we are using those wine after aging and what we call riddling them, disgorging them, and presenting them to the public.
Mm-hmm. And now to get back to the North Fork, were you working with some other wineries when you first came out here before Sparkling Pointe? Like you've helped with Macari and Martha Clara and Sherwood House. How did you get involved with those wineries early on?
So Macari was actually looking for a winemaker in the late 90s, and that's where I started working on Long Island. So with Macari Vineyard, it was very interesting because they had planted a very large vineyard, the second largest of Long Island at the time, and they had a lot of varieties, French varieties, basically. And it was my first discovery of what Long Island could produce in terms of quality grapes, and the Macaris had a lot of the new clones that we talked about that were very quality clones. So we're able to make very nice wine with them, and until now they're still making fantastic wine as well. With Martha Clara was a little bit the same thing. That was a third larger vineyard of the moment, and something quite newly planted with very nice varieties. So I was able to develop a lot of their program that they still carry today, and making very nice wine as well with Mr. Enterman at the time. And then I've been preaching for maybe the style of wine that I always loved, the sparkling wine, and not a lot of people were actually responsive in terms of making 100% sparkling wine winery. But Tom and Cynthia Rosicki from Sparkling Pointe today had that vision, and I was able to start the winery from scratch, from the first acres that we planted, which were 10 acres, to the 40 acres that we're exploring today to make wine, that we're farming today to make wine. And that's been a fantastic experience. So this is the only winery on Long Island and in New York State that are solely producing sparkling wine.
Wow. And what year did that start?
So the first vineyards was planted in 2004. And the winery was built in 2009. The first, by the time we were already producing wine from a neighboring vineyard and at a winery, a custom crush facility in Matituck. And then in 2010, I started to make all the wines at Sparkling Pointe. So since 2010, everything is done there from A to Z, from the grapes to the bottling and disgorging of the wine.
And was that something, because you said that's the only sparkling wine?
It's the only winery that only produces sparkling wine. That only
produces
so
sparkling.
On Long Island, we have a few wineries that also making sparkling wine as a part of their line. We also work with some of those wineries to help them during that process, because sparkling wine production requires very specific equipment that they don't necessarily want to invest in. So we can actually share our equipment with them and work with them for them to produce those beautiful wines as well.
Was that something at first that were people skeptical at first, doing a whole?
I think at the time it was really the beginning of sparkling wine growth, and sparkling wine's been growing since then. Even today, although we enter kind of a slow sales in all wines worldwide, wines kind of slow down a little bit. Sparkling wine still leading the pack in terms of sales in its category. So it certainly was something that people didn't know much about. It's more complicated to produce. It has a lot more technology into it, and it requires specific equipment that people don't necessarily want to invest in as well. And that's why it takes maybe a little more reflection or more thoughts in that process, to get into that process.
Mm-hmm. And what about the Long Island's climate? You mentioned it's a cool climate and it's perfect for Champagne grapes.
So, although we get really warm weather in the summer, we're still a maritime climate. We're surrounded by 3 bodies of waters: the Sound, the Bay, and the ocean, and that temperates a lot our temperature. We are 10 degrees warmer during the winter than the city, for example, and 10 degrees cooler during the summer. That help us to grow our grapes. Also, because of the maritime situation or location, we have a lot of breeze, we have a lot of wind, and that help us a lot in terms of agriculture to grow the grapes, to fight the disease that grows on different crops. And Long Island, and particularly the North Fork, has always been a big agricultural location, and that fed the city for many, many years. So we have that benefit here to have also very well draining soil that help us to grow our grapes. Even if we have sometime a lot of rain, the soils are capable to handle that precipitation, those precipitation that can happen during the growing season, and after that during the picking season. We had some years where we had a lot of rain and we were still able to get into our vineyard after the rain and pick our grapes, where sometime if you have some very heavy style of soil, you can go there with your tractor. You get stuck into the vineyard. On Long Island, because of our sandy, loamy soil, we are capable to still, handle the work in the vineyard despite the rain that we could get.
Yes. And then you've often talked about blending old world tradition with new world innovation. How do you balance these two aspects in your winemaking?
I think it's a little bit what I mentioned before. Using traditional technique, traditional method is a way to maybe avoid certain mistakes that you could do. But I think when you change location, when you change geographic places, you have different challenges that you're going to meet. And therefore, if we can help ourselves with the new technologies, that's something that there's no reason not to use. Particularly into the sparkling wine world, where we have a lot of technology. That's also a good thing for us to use.
And then it seemed like pretty right off the bat you were able to get a lot of even recognition. Even in 2009, Sparkling Pointe's 2000 Brut Seduction won Best of Class at the San Francisco's Chronicle Wine Competition. What did that win mean for Long Island's sparkling wine?
So for us, and I was at that tasting, not the tasting, but the award ceremony, it was quite a shock for California. The organizer of that ceremony, of those tastings, told me the story that, of course, they do blind tasting. So all the wines are in a brown paper bag and aluminum foil, so they can see what it is, and they taste the wines, and at the end they can unveil what it is. And when they unveiled the sparkling wine from Sparkling Pointe, and they tell this is a New York wine, this is Long Island, this is the North Fork of Long Island, people had their jaw dropping because they haven't really heard much about these coasts. A little bit, because been in the business for quite a long time. But in those competition, you compete against all American wines and basically California wines. And there is a lot of houses of wines, as you know, wineries in California, and they were really surprised and really I don't want to say the term jealous, but I should say that, of those wines that were made over there. What I have to say is that we have a climate that is a little more what you will find in Europe than the California climate. That's a really warmer, hotter climate. You will find a similar climate in Chile, from California, Chile, Australia, Argentina, where we have wines that are more like European wine, Italy, France. That's maybe what seduced the panel that was judging the wine. But what I have to say that's even more honor for me is when we went to London, a competition that's held by Tom Stevenson. We call him the guru of champagne and sparkling wine because he wrote a lot of books very early on about champagne and sparkling wine. And that we won also the best of the class for our Brut Rosé called Topaz, among our colleagues from Champagne, from Italy, from basically the whole world. That was even a bigger honor for me to be awarded with the best of the class that we had at the time. And even through the years, we keep on getting very high scores as well. And I think Sparkling Pointe helped the whole Long Island area to define something new for the area, making great wine, higher score wines. And even for the red wine and the white wine, we see our score going higher and higher into the competition, which is the result of our work, our understanding of our terroir and how we should make those wines. And it's great for the area. It's not only for Sparkling Pointe, it's also for the whole area because we need that. And even for New York State. I enjoy the wine from the Finger Lake, from the Hudson River as well. And we see a lot of progress and success with those regions as well.
And you mentioned California has been known for their wines, but do you think even with climate change in California and then here we are becoming we can create more of those old world wines where it's going to be more of a struggle over there with climate change?
Well, the East Coast is facing a big challenge because the predictions are that this area is going to be drier and drier with time. California has been lucky the last few years because they still had snowpack in the Sierras and quite a bit of rain early on. Actually, my daughter is also in the wine business. She's a winemaker as well for Stag's Vineyard in Napa Valley. And she's telling me regularly what's happening over there. And they've been lucky the last few years, but the prediction of the weather forecast and models are not really rewarding in terms of rain. It's pretty much drier weather. So California and the West Coast, Oregon, Washington State is going to have to adapt even more to that. And maybe those houses of wine might be interested in coming more to the East Coast, to where we should have actually plenty of rain. That's what the models are showing, is that we won't like rain. Although we see a lot of changes into the weather pattern, where, for example, last year we had a very dry season at the end of the season in September, October. We didn't get much rain. Which is beneficial for the ripening of the grapes to a certain extent.
And you mentioned that the North Fork area has been getting more recognition, but do you see that? Because I think even we can talk about, you mentioned in the 80s and with Hargraves and just trying to get people to try the wines in the beginning and getting people to come out to the tasting rooms, or getting restaurants in New York City to have the wines on the menu. Is that something you've seen change over your time here too?
Yes. Fortunately for us, yes. The way The Long Island wines being perceived today are way, way better than they were to start with. That's because, as I said, there's a lot of progress made in the vineyard, in the wineries, with the people that are part of that process, and the investment that's been done. Today, a lot of restaurants enjoy the fact that they can actually have a local wine on their wine list, more than one actually, every category: sparkling, white, red, rosé. And we see that development taking part of it. Even for Sparkling Pointe, we increased our wholesale distribution to other states, going to Connecticut, Massachusetts, New Jersey. We'll tackle the markets of the DC area before we end up going to maybe Chicago or Florida. There is, through the press, through the awards that we've been receiving, a enthusiast for Long Island wines and a demand for it. When I started 20 years ago, knocking at doors, it was not easy to sell the wine, although people recognized the quality of the wine. They were a little bit hesitant to take the wine for their customers. Today, it's a pleasure when I go on those marketing trip or sales trip to see how people recognize the brand and even buy the most expensive of our wines because they find out that they have a clientele for it, and that's really, really rewarding for me.
Yes. And also, you've referred to base wines as modest larvae to transform into beautiful butterflies. What does that metaphor mean, and what makes a base wine suitable for great sparkling wine?
So, in the making of sparkling wine, and without being too technical, we have two steps, two different big steps. The first step is to make regular white wines with low sugar and higher acidity. So those wine will make wine that are between 10.5 to 11% alcohol. That's what we call base wine. They are basically made of Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, and Meunier. We have a couple other varieties that we use on the side, but those three first varieties are the varieties from Champagne, and they're the ones that are making the better blends. So once those wines are made, harvesting the grapes, pressing the grapes, following a certain cycle, which is called the Champenois pressings, and fermenting at low temperature, about 63, 64 degrees Fahrenheit. We make those base wine that will enter into those blend programs. So, for example, at Sparkling Pointe, I'm making what we call a regular brut. That will be your Veuve Clicquot if you want, or your Brut Classic from Deutz. Then we make some Brut Rosé that we call Topaz. We make some sweeter wine, the Carnaval line, Carnaval Blanc, Carnaval Rouge, Carnaval Rosé. We also make specific varieties, like a Blanc de Blanc made exclusively from Chardonnay, or a Blanc de Noir made from the Pinot Noir and the Pinot Meunier. All those different programs have to come into that a large tasting that I do every year, about at the end of the year, early following years, and I make those specific blends to create those different programs. And then when this is done, we go to step 2, which is the second fermentation in the bottle, meaning that we add some sugar into the wine and we add the life culture of yeast. And by putting those two ingredients into the wines, putting it into a bottle that will be at the time closed with a plastic closure and like a beer crown cap, the second fermentation starts. And the yeast transforms against the sugar into alcohol and carbon dioxide, because the carbon dioxide is trapped into the bottle, not like during the first fermentation that is done in a tank. The carbon dioxide escapes through the top of the tank. In the bottle, it stays in it, and it creates the effervescence of the wine and the pressure in the wine. And the growth of those yeast that create that pressure creates a sediment. And that sediment, yeast leaves, the fermentation lasts, let's say, anywhere between 6 to 8 weeks. And then once there is no more sugar, yeast are going to die fairly fast. So they will settle, and they will release a lot of what they have into their walls. And a lot of that is what we call the amino acids. And the amino acids will take part of the bonding of the carbon dioxide into the wine. The yeast also bring a certain flavors. As the wine age on top of that sediment, it's going to develop the toastiness, the doughiness, a bit like the bready characters that you find. And then also the almond, toasted almond characters as well. Mm-hmm. So it brings something else into the flavor of the wine as well. Mm-hmm. And depending on the program, I choose to have them aging shortly, like for example the Brut, the Topaz, that will age 2 to 3 years on the yeast. Those wine will really express a lot of fruitiness, cherry, strawberry, red currant. And as the wine age longer, and depending on those type of wines, for example, a Blanc de Blanc, which made 100% from Chardonnay, will age 4-5 years on the yeast, bringing more of those pear flavors, apple flavors, and those doughy characters from the aging on the yeast, because it's been a few years more. And then I have a cuvée that's called Brut Seduction that actually aged 8 years on the yeast. That's going to develop a lot of those really toasty characters in the wine, and bring also a little more structure to the wine as well. Mm-hmm. And the bubbles as the wine sits on the yeast, that yeast actually becomes smaller and smaller and smaller with times. So with a program like the Brut Seduction, when you pour the wine into the glass, you'll see that the bubbles are very tiny, very fine, and they very evolve differently under your tongue and to your palate. Mm-hmm. And you'll find that effervescence very creamy as well.
And I'm curious.
That's why I'm talking. Sorry, to go back to the larva, to the chrysalis, to the butterfly. It comes from something that we create that's not unknown, but a specific item, if you want, to something that should develop into something beautiful in terms of aromatics and structure and length and that's what we'll call the butterfly. Yes. With all the colors.
And I was curious, even just in terms of Sparkling Pointe, what would you consider the most favorite wine that you've created with your time here, or one that you've enjoyed the most?
So I think it's like if you were asking which of your kids are your favorite.
It's hard to
define, right?
Yes.
Same thing with the wines. I think it's also, all those wines are beautiful, and I invite your listener to come to the winery and to taste our wine. We're open almost all year long from about 10 to 5. Mm-hmm. We have also a lot of events that happen, and if you go on the website sparklingpointe.com, so you can see all the different events that are organized to pair food with wine. Very interesting. The question was
if you had to pick.
Oh yes, if I had to pick one that I like better, and one of my children that I like better. So I think it goes a little bit with the mood you're in, and also every year when we release the new vintage of it, we maybe prefer that new vintage from the older vintage, or the older vintage from the new vintage. But one that stand out, a couple that stand out, of course, is that Topaz, that really is a award-winning wine, like the Brut Seduction as well. Those two are really the two leading wines. But the Brut is what I want people to enjoy, because that's the image of the house. If they love that wine, they will love the rest of the lines. And after that, everybody has his favorite. If you like more the Pinot Noir, you can have that Blanc de Noir. If you like more the Chardonnay grapes, you'll have that into the Blanc de Blanc. They all have their differences. They're all beautiful and enjoyable. And I invite everybody to come and taste them.
Yes, definitely. And then just looking at your career and experience over the past 30 years, what have been the most rewarding moments in your winemaking career?
As I mentioned before, when you are among your peers and you receive a distinction, starting with the first I had with my thesis, with the different competition, San Francisco, London, and other places, or just by talking with the people that you meet and says, oh, I've been enjoying Sparkling Pointe for so many years, or I've been enjoying your wines. When I was at Macquarie, we had a Chardonnay that was served at the White House. That's also a distinction that, mark a little bit your career in a certain way. It is important to stay modest, stay true to your wines in your tasting, in your work, in order to really dedicate your work to quality. There's only a way for our wineries on Long Island to succeed, is to make quality wines, because we're in competition with the whole world. And the idea is to be in different regions of the world that produce those beautiful wines and that people enjoy. Because when you drink a wine, somewhere you're traveling through the world, but you're traveling also through time. You drink different vintages that bring different memories. It brings different wine from the world, brings also different travel that you experience in your life. It is a product that give you that memories that's great. And it's part of the well-being of each of us, having the pleasure to discover a product that will access your memories in a certain way, because as you know, all your taste, your smell re-triggers your brain in terms of memories.
Yes. And then I'd like to ask as like a last question, what are your hopes for the future of the North Fork, both in terms of the wine industry and its community as it continues to grow and evolve?
So the beautiful thing that we've seen happening on Long Island the last 30 years is that this farming community diversified quite a bit. Used to be potatoes. Now potatoes are a thing of the past, although you still can grow good potatoes on Long Island. You have all the orchards. You have all the vegetable farms. You have now a little bit more of cattle and goats and different animals that raise for different purposes. And you have the wineries that brought also a lot of tourism in the area. People coming, visiting us. And all this community makes a whole and makes a new dynamic into the economy, the local economy. And without this development, Long Island will certainly be maybe just houses. And we want to preserve the beauty of Long Island. And and preserve the
open space.
The open space with a sustainable program for the farms that a lot of the farms and the winery and the vineyards follow. And this is for the next generation. A lot of the second generation of the first vintners start to be ahead of those wineries. And this is a great thing. It means that it's perennial, and then it has an upcoming beat for Long Island society, and the people that enjoy living on Long Island will keep that way of life a little longer. So we need that farming community to be together, and united together to really keep what Long Island, and particularly the North Fork, is today, in order to keep this open space and have a beautiful place to live and grow grapes and different foods.
Yes, absolutely. And then just lastly, I'd like to just ask if there was anything else you wanted to discuss or say that we haven't talked about.
Well, I think with podcasts like yours, with the different press that we're getting, that's something that we see happening more and more, and it helps to develop our business not only in New York but also in the country and also overseas. Long Island's been, and New York wines have been exporting more and more, not only to local export, close export, like for example we did export to Puerto Rico, but also to Europe, to China as well. So we need to be known a little more. The Big Apple is known. Well, why not the big grapes? But it is something that it's something that we need to work on every day. And the social network also help us to do that.
Yes, definitely.
So thank you to have us here today.
Yes.
And not only me as a Sparkling Pointe representative, but for all the wine community and the farming community as well.
Yes. And yes, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to come on today and share your story and your passion for wine, and also bringing your expertise to the North Fork. So thank you so much for coming on.
Well, it has been almost 30 years of pleasure working out here, growing something new, building something new, and serving the community for producing better wines and enjoying better wines as well. And again, the quest is for quality, and that's the key of the success.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Well, I hope you enjoyed episode 143 with Gilles Martin. I want to thank you for listening to the Floyd Memorial Library podcast, and we'll see you next time.